Orion.
Well, and the other thing, Corey, which your update, there's some very significant developments that have happened as a result of this update, and this appears to be the most immediate way we can discuss this, since we're doing this and it's live and we're on video as well. First of all, there was a very intense amount of discussion you gave about the idea of some kind of solar event.
Yes.
And this is actually something that I started to talk about intensely in Source Field Investigations, my first book. I didn't really talk about that much in Synchronicity Key, but now I very much talk about it in the new book with all kinds of references to ancient scriptures of different religions. You got Islam, you got Hinduism, you got Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity. I mean, they all are predicting pretty much the same thing. And when you really kind of do your homework, and this also includes, I did some great new research in here on Greek and Roman philosophy. Specifically, there's a philosophy called Stoicism. And there's a word you can look up, and I'm finally going to put this out there. I didn't want it stolen from me before this point. But the word is ekpyrosis. And there's different ways to spell it, but you can look it up right now. Try this one, E-K-P-Y-R-O-S-I-S. That's one way to spell it. Another way to spell it is E-C-P-Y-R-O-S-I-S. Now, what is ekpyrosis? It is a widespread belief in many philosophical teachings from Greece and Rome that the sun is going to give off this massive flash of energy. So it's not just the religions. If you look up ekpyrosis, it is the science, and it's talked about in these various philosophical texts from these guys that are called Stoics or Stoicism. And I'm looking at papers that have only had maybe 25 views online that are intense scholarly academic investigations of this widespread belief in Greek and Roman times that the sun was going to do this. But it all was kept in secret societies. It was swept under the rug. People don't know about this. They don't understand that we are not just talking about some ridiculous Christian rapture where, you know, the believers of the 144,000 fly up into the air like kites while everybody else burns in fire. This is a very widespread belief, which Corey's new information, Corey, I want to throw this back to you because this is another thing we definitely need to cover as soon as we can before we run out of time. You're hearing from all across the board, and I, of course, list, you know, all the insiders I know were telling me about this, and I put their testimony in here. Everybody thinks this is going to happen on the inside. It's just a question of exactly what it is and what is it going to do, right, Corey?
Exactly. Gonzalez, when he communicated with me what was about the subject, had stated that out of all these different secret syndicates that run the world, they have they don't all have the same belief system. They have a wide spectrum of different beliefs, and some of them are more on the esoteric end of the spectrum and believe, as we do, that there's going to be some sort of ascension or energetic change, and they see it as something that they need to hide from. This ascension is not going to be good for them. Then there's this, as you go up the ladder, you have people that think, okay, there's going to be a huge, they're saying it's going to be a complete coronal mass ejection. The entire corona of the sun is going to explode outwardly to the solar system. And the sun will go almost completely dark for a number of days. That's just what a number of days.
Yeah, I had one insider tell me that they're expecting everything, all the temperatures in the solar system will be at least 400 degrees Celsius when this takes place. I've heard that. Yeah, so there's a catastrophe side of this that some people think that's what it's going to be.
Yes, and these groups point to, and I don't know the details of the evidence, but they point to what they found within our solar system at some of these ancient sites. They found that this happens on a regular basis, and it's happened in the past. Just a lot of the ancient archaeology that's in our solar system is damaged. A lot of it's damaged. Some warfare, natural disasters, all kinds of stuff. But a lot of these groups, as you start going up the ladder, they believe, okay, we'll get hit by this CME, and then we'll lose all electronics, all electricity, or knock us back for a decade. So that'll be the extent of it. And then there are other eggheads that we call scientists that believe that it's going to consume the surface of the Earth. So and then there's in between each of those, there's people that have beliefs of what's going to happen. But none of them are on the same page.
Well, but I want to point out, that's the kind of thing that could put a stench of fear and horror around what we're discussing right now. I want to point out that this is an investigation, and it's an investigation that, again, 500 pages barely even covered everything. All I did is give a thumbnail sketch and overview, but the idea is that when you actually look at these ancient scriptures, it appears that the people that inspired them or wrote them were benevolent extraterrestrials who know more about this than our government does, because they have the ability to look outside of time and look outside dimensionality. And that's the key. It does appear that this is a dimensional shift in which we get into the real essence of what it means to be a human, where you have, as it said at the beginning of this talk, there was a little screen grab there of an image of densities and different densities of reality. So this does appear to be something in which, if you are ready for it, your body will transition into what is called in the Bible the incorruptible body. That's just Apostle Peter, in it's 2 Peter 13 is one of the ones that talks about it. Then you go into other religious texts like Zoroastrianism, and they talk about this thing called frashokereti, in which they say that the sun gives off something akin to a molten metal, like a light that's like molten metal, and that the wicked are consumed by it, but the just, whatever that, you can interpret what that means, and they do give some guidelines, that it's just this very intense energetic rush, but you don't have any other experience that's negative. And the word frashokereti in Zoroastrianism actually translates as making wonderful. So the teaching is that this is what makes the world a wonderful place to live. And that's very nicely mirrored in the book of Revelations, when you see the New Jerusalem, the new heaven and the new earth that is formed by this. And also, Corey has described that there is some kind of interstellar rescue program from these various so-called genetic farmer ET groups, where they know that this thing's going to happen too. And even if you're not going to ascend, they will make sure that you're safe and they'll get you out of here before the big event hits. So only the people who are going to who need this thing to happen in a negative way, karmically, will experience it that way. Would you agree with that, Corey, what I just said?
Yes. And we can't forget the inner Earth groups as well, that in the past, when we've had catastrophes, and I think this one's going to penetrate the Earth fully. I was shown an image of waves coming in, hitting the Earth's magnetic field, and holding over to the poles, coming into the center of the Earth, and then radiating out. So,
wow.
In the past, these inner Earth groups have pulled humans in to save certain genetic lines during catastrophe. I don't think that's necessarily going to be possible with this, whatever it's going to be. And it's just it's kind of ignorant for these elites to think that they can hide, a few miles underground and not be exposed.
Yeah, Corey, let's discuss, because I'm watching the clock ticking down here and it's going fast.
I also have a bunch of questions, and when you get a chance,
sure. But that's why I wanted to get this in first. Absolutely. One of the other things that I want to see Corey make a public statement about this, because it's a very significant development, is that we have had his blue avians that he's in contact with, raw tier air, raw rain air, raw mare air, are now speaking to him since he started to read the Law of One as they asked him to. They're now speaking to him in exactly the same verbiage, same languaging that's in the Law of One, strongly suggesting that this is in fact who he's dealing with, that the Ra of the Law of One is who he's talking to, which makes a whole lot of sense. And so I want to make that statement first, which is already in your update, Corey, and then I wanted to also say this, which is In the Law of One, they explain that the 25,000-year cycle is an Earth evolutionary shift, but that at the end of the 25,000-year cycle, some people go, some people stay behind. They also say that there's a triplicity to the 25,000-year cycle, and at the end of 3 cycles, that the sphere itself is no longer habitable for third-dimensional life. So that seems to correspond with what you're saying, Corey, which is that, in fact, this is a global reset point, and if you don't have a light body, you're not going to be here. It's not like regular flesh. And they actually say that in the Bible. It says in Corinthians, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. That seems to be a religious view of the same idea of ekpyrosis, which is that if you're going to be here, you've got to activate your light body, or you're just not going to be here at that point after this happens.
Correct. And going back to the Law of One and the Flavians, after I was actually able to finally read the book, I had all kinds of blocks. I just couldn't read it. I had this weird thing. We were in Joshua Tree for a conference there, and I heard this chorus of voices saying, "We are the messengers and facilitators of the one infinite creator." And it said it over and over and over. And I was like, what is going on? I went outside, looked around, came back in, think someone was room with me. And after that, I reached over and picked up the book, and I could read it. You know, the information was going in my head. Words were no longer hovering over the page. And after that, as David said, pure air began to communicate in the same type of language. But also, reading the book helped me get over a barrier where I could now converse a lot better with individuals. I could ask questions and understand all the details that they're trying to communicate. So it was a pretty big breakthrough.
Yeah. So just to round out that thought, I really encourage everybody not to have fear about this, despite the overwhelming aspect of what we're discussing, because this video may end up online, and people who are not really conversant with the message are going to be encountering this data. And we got to be always really careful to respect the amount of fear that people could have when they encounter something like this if they're not really that spiritual. I've been discussing ascension online for 20 years. I started to participate in Richard C. Hoagland's online discussion forum in 1996, and I was already talking about this 20 years ago. People who are kind of ensconced in the material illusion are not going to be too happy about the idea that there is an absolute point that will be reached in the not too distant future in which you either are going to ascend or you're going somewhere else. Everybody kind of wants to think, well, that's bad, and we need the world to just kind of keep on going, and it's just going to stay the same. We don't like a big change. A big change is scary. How do I know if I'm going to ascend? How do I know if my dog is going to go with me? Blah, blah, blah. What if my kid isn't going to ascend? I don't want to ascend without my kids, all this kind of stuff. You have to understand that, first of all, on the pet question, we know that animals will become human in their next cycle. If most pets actually are now inspirited, and they will be able to return as human, and that's what we provide them as like their ascension. So don't deny your pet their own ascension to be able to become a human being. That's number one. Number two, children are innocent before a certain age, and they're not going to be subject to the laws of karma. So even if your kid is rambunctious and causes trouble, most likely if you're ascending, your child is going to be ascending too. So you don't need to worry about that. Also, it appears from some of the stuff that I was told in the 90s that once ascension starts to happen, that it doesn't happen all at once. It goes in waves. And that people will be able to appear before those who haven't ascended yet in light body and tell them what happened and help them be prepared. And that's one of the subjects that we don't really know. Like, okay, is the solar flash just one flash, or is it a series of flashes? And Corey, in your remote viewing that you had, remember, it wasn't just one flash. It was like a series of events.
It was a sequence. It was flash, then flash, 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 flash. It happened like that.
Implying that we are not just going to have one sudden event that's like, that's it. but that there could be phases of this. We also have gotten new intel from 3 different interconnecting sources. Very interesting. I've talked about this briefly regarding tankers and various ships that are very large, run by the Draco, that are cloaked in lower Earth orbit, that are actually restricting us from ascension, that would already be happening to us now. And that these tankers, the military-industrial complex now has the ability to shoot these tankers down. And there's 2 main ones apparently orbiting the Earth. But if they do that, we will all be thrown into the equivalent of a psychedelic acid trip. And it's not a bad thing, but it's the scope of perspective change that will happen when you begin interfacing with the full thrust of this energy that's coming from the sun. You're going to have telepathy. You're going to have these paranormal abilities suddenly arise. And Corey, you talked about, and it'd be good to review that some of the SSP people experimented with these new solar energies and zapped people with them. And what happened to those people?
Yes, they took people, put them in sealed rooms that were shielded, and had them, people were members of the SSP. They were scientists, technicians, that kind of thing. They would put them in this room and say, okay, do this job. And then it would be 1 people, it'd be multiple people. They would sit there, they'd do their normal job, not know anything was amiss, and then they would, what they call, pipe in energies to see how the people would react. Would they get sick? What would happen? And what they found was that the people that were of a more positive polarity began to bliss out, began to sit back, their eyes, got all, I guess, sparkly, they would smile, were just, very blissed out. But the people that were of more of a negative polarity, a lot of the military types that had been in conflicts and that kind of thing, and just, your normal person that is just self-serving, in the same room, had the same energies piped in, and they became violent. They became, they called it end-time madness, is what they were calling it. So a lot of this has to do with what will happen ultimately, what we will experience ultimately, has mainly to do with not only our polarity, how much service to others we are, but our co-creative consciousness as a mass population. We're co-creating all of this at the same time that outside forces. It's very complicated when you really start looking at it. We have a lot more say in what we're going to experience than we realize, and we've been kept ignorant of our co-creative. We've been kept ignorant of that on purpose, so that we can use our co-creative consciousness against us and our black magic and keep us from rising up.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just want everybody to know here, I do have a solid time commitment that I got to meet in 14 minutes. So if you were saying that there were questions that we needed to address from the audience, and you want me to speak on something, I only have that window of time. I can't go any longer.
Yeah, same here.
I'm arguing with the comments here. So I maybe the guy who was going to ask the questions is not online anymore. I don't see him on our panelist list. But somebody had asked, I'm looking at the comments here, and I'll just say this. There was something about if the blue spheres are buffering the energy, then why are the Draco ships buffering it as well? And I think what's happening there is that the Draco are deliberately restricting the things that would have given us a benevolent consciousness shift that would restrict their ability to control us, whereas the spheres seem to be more about making sure that the sun doesn't flash before the right time. Would you agree with that, Corey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sorry, what did you say just before this? Because I had a comment about it.
Well, the Draco are doing their part to restrict our consciousness.
Yes, and they use technology that keeps our consciousness contained and also makes us apathetic. So this technology of theirs is being affected by these energetic influxes in our solar system. And what I've been told is they basically got their devices turned all the way up to 10 right now to be able to have the same effect they used to have before these energetic things started to occur.
Yeah, and when we are dealing with such a monumental consciousness shift, these beings cannot afford to have us achieve that ascension. They don't want this to happen. And so therefore, we're not going to have, they're going to be allowed to do what they can do. And I think that's an important point, is that the benevolent beings are authorizing the Draco to do this. If they didn't want the Draco to do this, they could stop it. So there's some aspect of this in which spiritual growth has to take place in the dark. You're not allowed to know too much, because then you wouldn't learn anything. That's a very basic law of one teaching. You have to be ignorant, and ignorance is part of the equation, so that from that lack of proof comes the exercising of faith, the exercising of will, and that's ultimately where spiritual mastery is made. You don't get spiritual mastery if you're happy and if you know all the answers. You get it when you're in pain and when you're suffering. And somebody had asked a question here about service to self versus service to others, and where do we strike the balance between loving our enemies and having healthy boundaries? And this is thoroughly discussed in the Law of One. It's a very fertile territory for spiritual investigation, because the Law of One does say that you have to protect yourself, that you have to have healthy boundaries. You do not want to allow negative forces to overwhelm you and dominate you. That being said, while you maintain your healthy boundaries, it's very important to have that cosmic consciousness of why this is being done, and that ultimately these beings are offering you service in their own way, and that you can love them as a part of yourself, ultimately, as the one creator that is confused. So you hold that loving consciousness in your mind. You don't judge them, you don't hate them, but you also tell them, I can't let you do this. Corey, you're the only other guy who's unmuted. So
Yeah, well,
agree with that?
Yes, I do agree with that. And we may only have time for one or two questions if Richard.
Yeah, we have about 8 minutes left, and I have a whole list of questions, so I'm going to try to bring them all together. First question is, real quickly, when's the next time both of you are going to be speaking? What event are you going to be speaking at, real quickly?
We don't have anything planned where we're both on stage at the same time right now.
Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, that's right. You're right, buddy. Alien Con. There's a Comic Con is now Alien Con. They're doing that as well, and that's going to be at the end of October. And Corey and I are going to have a panel of like an insiders SSP panel at that event.
Excellent. There was also several questions. I'm sort of going to combine them all. One, the lady's question was, she has believes she was part of the MyLab program, and she has these sort of embedded dots on her back. She wants to know if that means possibly that she was part of the program. They're like scars on her back. And how would you suggest to somebody to try to start remembering if they were part of these MyLab type of programs? Are you, any suggestions, any protocols on how to reawaken those memories, or how to try to, get into remembering that?
Well,
it could. Go ahead, Corey.
Okay, sorry. The waves of overcoming the programming and the mind control are as various as human beings that have had the mind control or memory wipes, blank slating they call it. So I was in the 3 to 5% of people that they could not successfully mind wipe or reprogram totally. So I did not have to go through the steps of having little memories and then start to pull from them and recover them. I know that there's regression therapists. You have to make sure you pick one that's really responsible. They can add memories and experiences where there are none. David, do you know of any protocols for recovering memories if you feel like you've been in one of these programs?
Yeah, there's a variety of things, and I think it's really important to remember that this is a subject very much involving your higher self, this aspect of you that's in what the Law of One would call sixth density, that is directing all your incarnations from an overview perspective. And The higher self's goal is to promote your consciousness evolving at a speed that you can tolerate. So it's very important to be able to make contact with your higher self, and you can start out by using things like divination. Meditation is very important. As you progress, you'll discover that dreams can become very valuable, and it's very common for people to begin accessing these memories in the guise of dreams and meditation. You'll have a dream that has some fragment of it, and then that might trigger a memory that will start to live within you as it goes on. And I've had a lot of data come to me that way.
Excellent. Another question, which a couple people have prompted about. The blue avions, we've heard a lot about them just the last few years. Can you talk a little bit about why just now they're coming into the talk, just why now we're hearing about them? Just the last few years, it seems a lot of information has been coming in.
Well, Richard,
the time where they're coming in to connect with us?
Richard, that's actually not the case. We did a whole 2 episodes of Cosmic Disclosure with William Henry, in which he did a masterful, prodigious amount of research to show that blue avians are all over the place in ancient Egyptian iconography, temple paintings. They show up in Buddhism. They show up in Hinduism. This is not anything new. It's just that these beings apparently didn't want to show themselves to us until the right time in our history, but then we were able to go back to old history and find out that they were actually very prevalent.
Got it. Excellent.
Yeah.
And one more quick question for both of you. Is the chemtrails affecting people being able to contact with their higher self?
I would say yes. I've heard from insiders that there are alien chemtrails as well as cabal chemtrails, and that both groups are both types of chemtrails exist. The chemtrailing is a multifaceted problem. It's considered very serious. Our government doesn't want to tell us about it because part of it is being done by extraterrestrials, apparently. But also, again, bear in mind that the benevolent forces are preventing anything from being weaponized to a point where it would really cause mass destruction. So none of this is ever going to be allowed to go beyond something that's more of like a splinter in the mind that triggers our awakening. It's not going to actually be something that could cause mass death. But yeah, chemtrails are real. We've heard a lot about this, and that will be stopped as all this stuff unrolls and as we get disclosure and we get the defeat of the bad guys. So we're in the last waning months or years of this being a problem.
And I know that from my show, Starseed Radio, we've had a lot of scientists on that have tested chemtrails and have found multi-dimensional nanofibers in them, which is part of what they're doing, is covering these multi-dimensional nanofibers which respond to electromagnetic signals, so they could fake an ET invasion or things like that. So there's a lot going on in that world. Who knows what the chemtrail program will come from. One more question. If you want to recall your past to see if you were part of any of the programs, quantum healing, therapy, look at DoloresCannon.com. I'm sure you both have know her, so I just wanted to throw that out there. And also, before we go, if you have any information you'd like to give out, your website, webinars coming up, like you just said, now would be the time.
Cool. I gotta jump, so I'll do that first. I'm very excited about working for Gaia and having 2 weekly shows. Corey and I are now finding other insiders and bringing them in. Cosmic Disclosure has had a quantum leap because we got this 94-year-old World War II veteran, William Tompkins, who has validated Draco reptilians, Antarctic ice bases, all kinds of amazing stuff, and we're coming out with that. I have his quotes and his testimony in this new book along with others, and it's an amazing read. I would recommend it highly. If you pre-order it, you save money, and you help us get on the New York Times bestseller list. Corey and I are speaking at AlienCon coming up, and he and I are actually about to be meeting in person as well, so I'm not seeing the last of him. But anyway, I want to thank all of you guys. My website is divinecosmos.com. I just released a new video. I highly recommend seeing it. It's called The Ascension Mysteries, 2 hours long. I have a really cool cinematic intro that I designed myself in there. And I have a new website, which is dwilcock, DWILCOCK.com, that you can use to sign up for Ascension updates coming straight from me. And so put your email in on that, and you'll be in on that group list as well. So I was glad to participate today. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everybody, for being out there. And thank you, Corey, for bringing me in on this. It's been awesome.
And real quickly before you go, if you could just leave us with one quote or one way that everyone listening, participating can help with this ascension or raise their vibration, what would you tell everybody? Just a one sentence, one quote.
Well, we used to joke about this because the Law of One message is extremely simple. And if there were only 3 words that the beings really wanted you to know, it would be just be nice. And if you can really, seriously though, we make it complex. We like complexity. Our minds want complexity, when in fact, all you have to do in the service to others path is just be kind, compassionate, forgiving, patient, loving. And the challenge is how to apply that in the world that is throwing all these obstacles at you that challenge you to not be patient, forgiving, loving, and kind. And so the more that you can practice that, especially in the times when you normally wouldn't feel loving at all, that's really the key.
Excellent. I also, from what I've learned, one piece is it's all about self-empowerment. At the end of the day, that's the biggest secret they don't want us to know, is just how powerful each of us are. So
and I do have my, since everybody's talking about T-shirts in the discussion forum, I am wearing my Contact in the Desert.
There you go. Great. Thank you so much, David, for your service and your work. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. And before we go, any last words, comments, and updating events that you wanted to give out?
Sure. I'm giving my first solo conference, excuse me, at Mount Shasta here, and it's like about a week now. And I started a new vlog. If you go to YouTube and look for Goode Vlog, my last name, Goode VLOG, then and subscribe, you will begin to get a lot of the behind-the-scenes videos that we're shooting. We're about to shoot some here in a few minutes for behind the scenes of Cosmic Disclosure. We're going to shoot them when we go to Alien Con, and we're going to start getting a lot more content behind the scenes for the fans to see.